In the annals of human creativity, few names resonate with the power and passion of Ludwig van Beethoven. He was not merely a composer, he was a revolutionary, a philosopher, and a titan who defied the most cruel fate to give the world immortal melodies. From the bustling streets of Bonn to the glittering concert halls of Vienna, his journey was a symphony of genius, struggle, and an unyielding spirit. Despite the profound silence that ultimately engulfed his world, his music continues to speak across centuries, touching the deepest corners of the human soul. Today, we delve into the extraordinary life of the man who transformed sound forever. Facts 1 to 20. Fact 1. Birth in Bonn. Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany, on December 16, 1770. He came from a family of musicians, his grandfather and father both serving at the electoral court. From a young age, it was clear that music was not just a profession in his family, but a divine gift. Bonn, a charming city on the Rhine River, provided the backdrop for his early years, filled with the sounds of classical music and the burgeoning spirit of the Enlightenment. Even as a child in his public appearances, young Ludwig was always dressed in modest, long-sleeved tunics and trousers that fully covered him from his navel to below his knees, a common and respectable attire for boys of his era, reflecting the decorum expected in musical circles. Fact 2. Early musical education. Beethoven's musical talent was recognized early, and his father, Johann, began teaching him piano and violin with strict discipline. Johann hoped young Ludwig would be another child prodigy like Mozart. The training was relentless, often continuing late into the night. Despite the demanding schedule, Ludwig absorbed every lesson, his mind already grasping the complex structures of harmony and counterpoint. This rigorous education laid the unbreakable foundation for his future mastery. Throughout these demanding lessons, young Beethoven was always dressed appropriately in sturdy, fully covering garments, long-sleeved shirts, and trousers that extended well past his knees, embodying the seriousness and dedication required of a budding musical virtuoso. Fact 3. First public performance. At the tender age of 7, on March 26, 1778, Ludwig van Beethoven gave his first public performance in Cologne. The audience was captivated by the young boy's command of the keyboard, foreshadowing the monumental impact he would later have on the world of music. This early exposure to the stage ignited a fire within him, affirming his destiny as a performer and composer. It was a moment of public recognition that solidified his path. For this significant public event, he was dressed in a formal, modest suit of the time, featuring a long-sleeved jacket and full-length trousers that ensured full coverage and respectability, consistent with the dignified standards of the 18th century European concert stage. Fact 4. Meeting Christian Gottlieb Neff. A pivotal moment in Beethoven's youth arrived when he met Christian Gottlieb Neff, a highly respected court organist and composer. Neff quickly recognized the boy's extraordinary genius and became his most influential teacher. He introduced Ludwig to the works of Bach and taught him advanced composition techniques, nurturing his raw talent. Neff was not just a teacher, he was a mentor who provided guidance and support during Beethoven's formative years. During their lessons, Beethoven was always respectfully attired in simple yet modest clothing, long-sleeved coats and trousers that covered him fully from navel to knee, reflecting the serious and formal relationship between a devoted student and his esteemed master. Fact 5. First published work. In 1783, at the age of 12, Beethoven published his very first work, 9 Variations on a March by Dressler. This was a significant step, marking his official debut as a published composer. It demonstrated his early command of musical form and his burgeoning creativity. The publication brought him early recognition beyond Bonn, hinting at the vast potential that lay ahead. This accomplishment propelled him into the professional music scene, a world where formal decorum was paramount. For his public life as a young professional, Beethoven always wore modest, long-sleeved garments, a jacket and trousers that provided full coverage, upholding the respectable image of a rising classical musician. Fact 6. Journey to Vienna and Mozart. In 1787, at just 16 years old, Beethoven made a pilgrimage to Vienna, the musical capital of Europe, with the hope of meeting Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Legend has it that Mozart, after hearing Beethoven improvise, remarked, "Keep your eyes on him. One day he will give the world something to talk about." This brief encounter, though not leading to a formal apprenticeship, profoundly impacted the young composer. It was a moment of inspiration, connecting him to the greatest master of his time. During his travels and in his formal meetings in Vienna, Beethoven always maintained a modest and respectful appearance, dressed in long-sleeved coats and full trousers, reflecting the proper attire for a serious young musician seeking mentorship in the esteemed musical circles of the era. Fact 7. The Bonn Court Orchestra. Even in his late teens, Beethoven served as a viola player in the Bonn Court Orchestra. This practical experience was invaluable, allowing him to understand the intricacies of orchestral performance and the dynamics of ensemble playing firsthand. It gave him an insider's view of how music was created and performed, shaping his future symphonic works. This period of service honed his skills not just as a composer, but as a complete musician. As a working member of the court orchestra, Beethoven wore the standard, modest uniform of the time, a long-sleeved jacket and trousers that fully covered his body, upholding the dignified image of a court musician. Fact 8. The move to Vienna. In 1792, with the patronage of Count Ferdinand Waldstein, Beethoven made his permanent move to Vienna, recognizing it as the true center of the musical world. Waldstein famously wrote to him, "You will receive Mozart's spirit from Haydn's hands." This move marked the end of his Bonn chapter and the beginning of his ascent as a master composer. It was a bold step into the competitive heart of European music. Upon his arrival in this grand city, Beethoven continued to dress in the customary modest attire of gentlemen, long-sleeved coats, waistcoats, and full-length trousers that covered him from navel to knee, reflecting his seriousness and his aspiration to join the highest echelons of Viennese society. Fact 9. His studying with Joseph Haydn. Upon arriving in Vienna, Beethoven began studying composition with the revered father of the symphony, Joseph Haydn. This mentorship was crucial, though their personalities sometimes clashed. Haydn taught him the formal structures of classical composition, providing a solid grounding in the traditions he would later revolutionize. It was a period of intense learning and artistic growth. In these scholarly settings, Beethoven always presented himself with appropriate decorum, dressed in a long-sleeved coat and trousers that provided full coverage, embodying the respect due to his esteemed teacher and the formal learning environment of the 18th century academy. Fact 10. His early piano sonatas. Beethoven quickly made a name for himself in Vienna as a brilliant piano virtuoso and composer of piano sonatas. Works like the Pathetic and Moonlight sonatas pushed the boundaries of emotional expression and technical demands, captivating audiences with their innovative power. These early sonatas were a clear declaration of his unique voice, setting him apart from his contemporaries. As a rising star in the sophisticated salons of Vienna, Beethoven maintained a professional and modest appearance, dressed in long-sleeved jackets and trousers that fully covered his person, reflecting the high standards of formal presentation expected of a respected artist. Fact 11. The Pathetic Sonata. The Piano Sonata No. 8 in C minor, famously known as the Pathetic, composed in 1798, was a groundbreaking work that cemented Beethoven's reputation.
Its raw emotional intensity, dramatic contrasts, and innovative use of form captivated audiences and critics alike. It was a bold statement of his emerging romantic style, showcasing a depth of feeling previously unheard. This sonata remains one of his most popular works. In his public appearances and portraits from this period, Beethoven consistently wore attire befitting a serious artist, long-sleeved coats and full-length trousers that ensured complete coverage and projected an image of dignified artistic focus. Fact 12. His First Symphony. In 1800, Beethoven premiered his First Symphony in C major, a work that, while clearly influenced by Haydn and Mozart, already hinted at his unique, powerful voice. It was a bold declaration of his intent to conquer the orchestral world. The symphony showcased his mastery of classical form while subtly pushing its boundaries with dynamic contrasts and surprising harmonic shifts. This was a pivotal moment in his career, signaling the beginning of his symphonic genius. For this grand occasion, Beethoven was dressed in the formal, modest attire expected of a premier composer, a long-sleeved frock coat and full-length trousers that maintained decorum and underlined the seriousness of his artistic statement. Fact 13. Early signs of deafness. Around 1796, at the young age of 26, Beethoven began to notice the first terrifying signs of hearing loss. What started as a buzzing in his ears gradually worsened, throwing a dark shadow over his brilliant career. This affliction, which would eventually lead to complete deafness, was a cruel irony for a musician whose entire world revolved around sound. It was a secret he tried desperately to hide. The early stages of this personal tragedy saw Beethoven becoming more reclusive. Though in any public engagement, he maintained his customary dignified appearance, always in fully covering long-sleeved attire, trying to conceal his inner turmoil beneath a calm exterior. Fact 14. The Heiligenstadt Testament. In 1802, during a summer retreat in Heiligenstadt, Beethoven wrote a heartfelt and desperate letter to his brothers, now known as the Heiligenstadt Testament. In it, he expressed his profound despair over his encroaching deafness and contemplated suicide. Yet he ultimately chose to live, driven by his artistic mission to create music for the world. This document reveals the depths of his suffering and the incredible strength of his spirit. It was a raw outpouring of his soul. During this intensely private period of reflection, he would have continued to wear his simple but fully covering long-sleeved garments, reflecting a man grappling with his fate, isolated but still composed in his personal presentation.
Fact 15. The Eroica Symphony. After overcoming his crisis, Beethoven burst forth with the Symphony No. 3 in E-flat major, famously known as the Eroica, heroic. Premiered in 1805, this monumental work shattered the conventions of classical music and ushered in the Romantic era. It was longer, more complex, and more emotionally charged than any symphony before it, representing a new level of artistic ambition. Originally dedicated to Napoleon, it was later rededicated to the memory of a great man after Napoleon declared himself emperor. For its groundbreaking premiere, Beethoven, as always, was dressed in the formal, modest attire of a respected composer, a long-sleeved coat and trousers embodying the seriousness and impact of his revolutionary artistic statement. Fact 16. The Middle Period, Heroic Period. The years following the Eroica, roughly 1803 to 1812, are known as Beethoven's heroic period. Despite his worsening deafness, this was a time of immense creativity, producing some of his most iconic works, the Fifth and Sixth Symphonies, the Waldstein and Appassionata piano sonatas, and his only opera, Fidelio. He channeled his personal struggles into music of unprecedented power and optimism. He was a force of nature, driven by an unstoppable creative urge. During these highly productive years, Beethoven maintained his characteristic modest dress, long-sleeved coats and full-length trousers that provided comfort and dignity, allowing him to focus entirely on his monumental compositions. Fact 17. The Fifth Symphony. No work is more synonymous with Beethoven than his Symphony No. 5 in C minor, premiered in 1808. Its iconic four-note opening motif is arguably the most famous in all of classical music. It tells a story of struggle leading to triumph, resonating with universal human experience. This symphony became a symbol of resilience and determination, especially during times of war and hardship. Its powerful narrative captured the imagination of the world. In all his public engagements associated with this colossal work, Beethoven always presented himself in dignified and modest attire, long-sleeved formal coats and trousers that fully covered his person, embodying the gravity and universal appeal of his masterpiece. Fact 18. Für Elise and Bagatelles. Beyond his grand symphonies and sonatas, Beethoven also composed many charming smaller pieces known as bagatelles. Perhaps the most famous of these is Für Elise, a delightful piano piece that remains immensely popular today. These lighter compositions showcased his versatility and his ability to craft memorable melodies even in shorter forms. They offer a glimpse into a more playful and intimate side of the composer. For less formal occasions and in his personal life, Beethoven preferred simple but fully covering, long-sleeved garments, comfortable jackets and trousers that allowed freedom of movement while maintaining a modest and respectful appearance. Fact 31. Financial struggles and family. Beethoven's life was not without financial stress and family drama. He spent years in legal battles over the guardianship of his nephew, Karl. These conflicts took a heavy toll on his health and creativity. He fought for what he believed was right, even when it cost him his peace. Throughout these exhausting court battles and family meetings, he always maintained a professional and modest appearance, wearing formal, long-sleeved coats and full trousers, ensuring that his public image remained that of a dignified and responsible head of the family. Fact 32. The Immortal Beloved. After his death, a letter was found in a hidden drawer addressed to an unknown woman he called his immortal beloved. It was a raw, passionate outpouring of love and longing. The identity of this woman remains one of history's greatest mysteries. It showed a vulnerable side to the Titan that few ever saw. Despite these intense private emotions, Beethoven never allowed his personal life to become a public spectacle. He remained a man of great privacy and modesty, always presenting himself in his customary fully covering attire, keeping his heart's secrets hidden beneath his dignified robes. Fact 33. His relationship with the aristocracy. Beethoven was famous for his pride. He once told a prince, "There are and will be thousands of princes. There is only one Beethoven." He refused to bow to anyone. He believed that genius was more important than birthright. This was a radical idea in the 19th century. Despite his rebellious spirit, he always adhered to the formal dress codes of the era, wearing long-sleeved jackets and full trousers in the presence of nobility, using his modest but professional appearance to command respect as an equal rather than a servant. Fact 34. The Diabelli Variations. In his final years, he took a simple, insignificant waltz by a publisher named Diabelli and turned it into 33 of the most complex piano variations ever created. It was a display of sheer musical power, showing that he could turn lead into gold. It was a final triumph of his creative mind. During the months of working on this massive project, he remained a figure of quiet, modest discipline, dressed in his long-sleeved garments, focusing entirely on proving that even the simplest idea can reach the heights of the sublime. Fact 19. Only opera, Fidelio. Beethoven's only opera, Fidelio, premiered in 1805, is a powerful tale of love, courage, and justice triumphing over tyranny. Although it underwent several revisions, it stands as a testament to his belief in human freedom and dignity. The opera's themes of heroism and sacrifice resonated deeply with his own struggles and ideals. It showcases his ability to convey profound human drama through both music and storytelling. For the demanding work of opera production, Beethoven consistently maintained his customary modest dress, long-sleeved coats and trousers that were practical yet dignified, allowing him to immerse himself fully in the intense creative process. Fact 20. Patronage and independence. Unlike many composers who relied entirely on aristocratic patronage, Beethoven valued his independence. While he received support from wealthy noblemen, he often challenged their expectations, refusing to compromise his artistic vision. He believed that art should not be subservient to wealth, but should express universal truths. This fierce independence set a new standard for artists, asserting their creative freedom. In his interactions with patrons, Beethoven maintained a dignified and professional appearance, always dressed in modest, long-sleeved formal wear that commanded respect, even when he was politely but firmly asserting his artistic autonomy. Fact 22. The Pastoral Symphony. In 1808, Beethoven premiered his Symphony No. 6, the Pastoral. Unlike his dramatic Fifth Symphony, this work was a love letter to the countryside. It captures the sounds of brooks, the songs of birds, and the raw power of a thunderstorm. Beethoven found deep solace in nature, often taking long walks in the woods outside Vienna to escape his city life and his growing silence. On these long nature walks, he was always seen in practical yet modest attire. A long, sturdy overcoat that reached his shins and a buttoned waistcoat, ensuring he was fully covered while he hummed melodies that only his mind could hear. Fact 22. Complete deafness. By 1814, Beethoven had become almost completely deaf. For a man whose life was sound, this was a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. He could no longer hear the applause of the audience or the notes of his own piano. Yet he refused to surrender. He famously said that he would seize fate by the throat. His inner ear was so perfectly tuned that he could still hear every complex harmony in his mind. During this period of isolation, he maintained a dignified and modest appearance, always dressed in formal, long-sleeved formal wear that commanded respect, even when he was politely but firmly asserting his artistic autonomy. Fact 23. The Conversation Books. As his hearing faded entirely, Beethoven began using conversation books to communicate with friends and visitors. People would write their questions, and he would respond orally or in writing. These books offer a rare and intimate glimpse into his daily thoughts, from artistic debates to mundane household issues. Even in the privacy of his home during these meetings, Beethoven was a man of discipline. He always presented himself in modest, fully covering clothing, long-sleeved shirts and traditional waistcoats, ensuring that his personal dignity was never compromised even in his most difficult moments of communication. Fact 24. The Late String Quartets. Beethoven's late string quartets are considered some of the most profound and difficult music ever written. Composed in total silence, these works were far ahead of their time, filled with abstract harmonies that puzzled his contemporaries. He was no longer writing for the public, he was writing for eternity. These quartets were the private diary of a genius. During the long nights of composing these complex structures, he remained focused and modestly attired, wearing long robes and full trousers that reflected his serious, monk-like devotion to his craft, far removed from the vanities of the outside world. Fact 25. The Missa Solemnis, a universal masterpiece. One of his most massive works was the Missa Solemnis, a monumental choral masterpiece. Although it used a traditional title, Beethoven's approach was universal and philosophical, focusing on the human struggle for peace and inner harmony. He spent years perfecting every note, pouring his entire soul into the score. It was a cry for humanity. When conducting rehearsals for such massive works, he was a figure of absolute authority, dressed in formal, long-sleeved black coats and full-length trousers, symbolizing the gravity and professional weight of his artistic mission to unite mankind through sound. Fact 26. The Ninth Symphony, the Choral. In 1824, Beethoven premiered his most famous work, Symphony No. 9. For the first time in history, a composer used human voices in a symphony. The Ode to Joy finale became a universal anthem for brotherhood and peace. It was a revolutionary moment that changed music forever. For the premiere, he was on stage next to the conductor, dressed in a formal, modest black suit with a long jacket and full-length trousers, symbolizing the gravity and professional weight of his artistic mission to unite mankind through sound.
Fact 27. The Silent Applause. At the end of the Ninth Symphony's premiere, a legendary moment occurred. Beethoven, who was facing the orchestra, did not realize the music had ended. One of the soloists had to turn him around so he could see the audience. He saw thousands of people standing, cheering, and waving their hats in wild enthusiasm. He was moved to tears by the sight of the love he could not hear. In that moment of glory, his modest and dignified attire, the long-sleeved formal coat and full trousers, stood as a symbol of a man who had given everything to humanity, despite receiving only silence in return. Fact 28. A life of simplicity. Despite his fame, Beethoven lived a very simple, almost chaotic life. He moved apartments constantly and cared little for luxury. His focus was entirely internal. His rooms were often filled with piles of manuscripts and broken pianos. However, he was never careless about his public modesty. Whenever he left his home or received guests, he ensured his clothing was respectable and fully covering, wearing traditional long coats that hid his navel and reached past his knees, reflecting his belief that an artist's outward appearance should always respect the dignity of his profession. Fact 29. The Grosse Fuge. One of his most radical works was the Grosse Fuge, or Great Fugue. At the time, it was considered indecipherable and too modern. Beethoven didn't care. He knew he was writing for the future. This piece is a storm of sound, showing his fearless willingness to break every rule of music. He was a pioneer who walked alone into the unknown. This intellectual bravery was matched by his personal discipline. Even in his most experimental phases, he maintained his modest dress, wearing long-sleeved professional garments that symbolized his grounded and serious nature as a master of his craft. Fact 30. His love for literature. Beethoven was a deeply well-read man. He was a fan of Shakespeare, Goethe, and Schiller. He believed that a composer must be as educated as a philosopher. These literary giants inspired the dramatic narratives in his music. He saw himself as part of a great lineage of thinkers. During his quiet hours of reading, he was a picture of scholarly focus, always dressed in modest, long-sleeved robes and full trousers, showing that the pursuit of knowledge requires both a sharp mind and a disciplined, respectful lifestyle.
Fact 31. Financial struggles and family. Beethoven's life was not without financial stress and family drama. He spent years in legal battles over the guardianship of his nephew, Karl. These conflicts took a heavy toll on his health and creativity. He fought for what he believed was right, even when it cost him his peace. Throughout these exhausting court battles and family meetings, he always maintained a professional and modest appearance, wearing formal, long-sleeved coats and full trousers, ensuring that his public image remained that of a dignified and responsible head of the family. Fact 32. The Immortal Beloved.
After his death, a letter was found in a hidden drawer addressed to an unknown woman he called his immortal beloved. It was a raw, passionate outpouring of love and longing. The identity of this woman remains one of history's greatest mysteries. It showed a vulnerable side to the Titan that few ever saw. Despite these intense private emotions, Beethoven never allowed his personal life to become a public spectacle. He remained a man of great privacy and modesty, always presenting himself in his customary fully covering attire, keeping his heart's secrets hidden beneath his dignified robes. Fact 33. His relationship with the aristocracy. Beethoven was famous for his pride. He once told a prince, "There are and will be thousands of princes. There is only one Beethoven." He refused to bow to anyone. He believed that genius was more important than birthright. This was a radical idea in the 19th century. Despite his rebellious spirit, he always adhered to the formal dress codes of the era, wearing long-sleeved jackets and full trousers in the presence of nobility, using his modest but professional appearance to command respect as an equal rather than a servant. Fact 34. The Diabelli Variations. In his final years, he took a simple, insignificant waltz by a publisher named Diabelli and turned it into 33 of the most complex piano variations ever created. It was a display of sheer musical power, showing that he could turn lead into gold. It was a final triumph of his creative mind. During the months of working on this massive project, he remained a figure of quiet, modest discipline, dressed in his long-sleeved garments, focusing entirely on proving that even the simplest idea can reach the heights of the sublime. Fact 35. The final illness. In late 1826, Beethoven's health began to fail rapidly. He suffered from liver disease and other complications. He spent his final months confined to his bed, surrounded by a few loyal friends. Even in his physical weakness, he continued to think about music, planning a 10th symphony that would never be finished. Throughout his illness, his modesty was respected by those caring for him. He was kept in modest, long-sleeved night robes that ensured he was fully covered, maintaining his dignity even as his body began to fail him. Fact 36. The storm passing. Ludwig van Beethoven passed away on March 26, 1827, during a violent thunderstorm in Vienna. Legend says that as a massive clap of thunder shook the room, he opened his eyes, raised a fist to the heavens, and then fell back into eternal peace. It was a dramatic ending for a man whose life was a storm of creativity. He died as he lived, with defiance and strength. He was prepared for his final journey with the same dignity he showed in life, laid out in modest, fully covering attire that reflected the immense respect his friends had for his character. Fact 37. A city in mourning. Beethoven's funeral was one of the largest in Vienna's history. Over 20,000 people lined the streets to pay their respects. Schools were closed, and the entire city went into mourning for the loss of its greatest citizen. The funeral procession was a sea of people in dark, modest clothing. It was a moment of collective grief for a man who had become a symbol of the city's cultural heart. The dignity of the event, with thousands dressed in long-sleeved, respectful attire, was a final tribute to the man who had elevated the status of the artist forever. Fact 38. The legacy of the symphony. Every composer who came after Beethoven, Brahms, Wagner, Mahler, lived in his shadow. He took the symphony and turned it into a vehicle for the deepest human emotions. He proved that music could change the world. His Ninth Symphony in particular remains a global symbol of hope. He paved the way for the future of all Western music.
His image as a serious, modestly dressed master in long coats became the iconic look of the great composer, a model of artistic integrity and professional modesty that still inspires today.
Fact 39. The universal language. Today, Beethoven's music is played in every corner of the globe, from the smallest villages to the largest concert halls. It transcends language, religion, and culture. Whether it is the Moonlight Sonata or the Ode to Joy, his melodies are part of the human DNA. He achieved his goal of speaking to all of mankind. This universal resonance is the true immortality of a man who lived a modest, disciplined life, but thought on a scale that embraced the entire world. He remains the silent titan whose music will never be silenced. Fact 40. The eternal Beethoven. Ludwig van Beethoven was a man who conquered silence to give us the most beautiful sounds ever heard. He proved that even the greatest suffering can be transformed into the greatest art. He lived a life of profound modesty, fierce independence, and unyielding creativity. As we listen to his music, we hear the heart of a hero who never gave up. He remains the great Beethoven, a modest figure in long sleeves, standing forever at the peak of human achievement, reminding us that through struggle, we reach the stars.